Alright guys, TacticalRab here, and I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Saturday here at CDL Major 4, OpTic Texas have already secured their spot at the World Championship, but it could go significantly better for the rest of the weekend. They play FaZe today. Dashy seems to be ready for that one based on what we saw last night after that series against Toronto they played, and if they do go even further in this tournament, they could secure a much better World Championship seeding that could give them a more beatable first round game. But OpTic will be thinking, try and win the tournament and let the numbers take care of themselves. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. Firstly, we've got to have a look at a few things. Of course, this is the Challengers pit, just to quickly kind of give you guys a taste of the venue, really, because, well, this is the main stage on the back left-hand side. You've got all the fans in front of that. The watch party stuff is on the far left. Then, if you go further back from that, you've got where the desk is, and it's kind of like in the middle of the Challengers pit, really, and this is the middle of the Challengers pit, and this is the Stallions, giving it large. So, yeah, the Challengers stuff has been great. It's honestly awesome to see the fans could just walk around and see what they want. If they want to watch Go the Halo, they can do that. We'll have a quick talk about that in a second as well, because, you know, this DreamHack stuff is pretty old school in many respects from what we used to have back in the day. Now, a couple of interesting series we discussed towards the end of last night. Toronto did eventually get the win against the Ravens. It was a Game 5 round 11, so I don't think JoeDeceives should be talking that much trash, really. You know, he was giving it pretty large. And this is after they got the win. Look, Insight clutch that 1 versus 2. In the end, Toronto continue in the tournament. They played today, but it's been far from clean for them. And the way that things currently stands, it might be looking pretty good for OpTic to try and find a way to play these guys again round 1 at the World Championship. Because right now, if you're OpTic, who would you rather play round 1 at Champs? FaZe, Thieves or Ultra? I think the answer to that is relatively clear. And it is all, to be fair, in OpTic's hands, whether that happens, I think. We'll have a look at that in a second, how possible that is. The other big story, though, of yesterday, really, was Kenny, end of season Kenny, on LAN, just turning up big time, right? And it's a cool story. I mean, we've seen this for, like, you know, the whole time Kenny's been a player, really. End of the year, he gets better. His search and destroy online is never good. Like, it's never been good, I don't think. And it probably never will be. But there is always a point in a season where his search on LAN actually gets good. And that's what we have this weekend. I mean, he had a 2 KD yesterday in the search. I think he has like a 1.3 in search over the entire tournament so far, which is, you know, not what you might have expected. But in the end, it's been a key difference maker, and it's kind of, I'm sure, frustrating for Rokkr a little bit, is that, you know, finally yesterday, yeah, they got 3-0'd by the Heretics, right? But they played a couple of big series, going to 5, and actually winning in 5. Like, come on, if they'd have just won some more Game 5s earlier on, they could have been in a far better position. As I say, it's still in their own hands. Technically, they can still make it to Champs, but that challenge is tough, and we'll see what that looks like in a second. Pred says, GG's Rokkr, because they went down in 5. Roller coaster of the year. Time to lock in for the Esports World Cup. And as Kenny says, you know, we live to see another day. Played terrible all day, got to lock in tomorrow. But yeah, I think when it mattered, honestly, in some of the search and destroys, Kenny did, to be fair, turn up. But Nero deserves a lot of credit, because I think it honestly makes things rather challenging for Rokkr, the fact that Nero now has just turned up, because this is what you get with Nero, really. Sometimes he'll be a bit of a stinky one, and then sometimes you get maps where he's dropping 47 and 50 kills. Like, it's pretty outrageous. And as a result of that, it now makes Rokkr's decision, assuming they don't make Champs, which they probably won't, kind of challenging, because what do you do, therefore, before the World Cup? If you can and want to make changes, if you're not going to make Champs to go to the World Cup, what do you do? Because, you know, Geo, Nero, Estriel, and Kenny should probably have been better than they are. And now, you know, even given the fact that you would probably say Estriel is the man to keep out of those 3, if you're going to presumably try and keep Kenny as well, then, you know, Estriel's not been that great lately, and now Nero delivers a performance like this. I don't know, I wonder what they'll do after this tournament, assuming that they bow out and don't make it to Champs. But I don't know, the run is technically still alive. The Falcons didn't make it in the end. Clay says we'll come back stronger for the World Cup. I don't know if that's going to be with a different team. I'm sure we're going to discuss in the coming weeks what that might look like, because I think a lot of people are looking at these numbers again from the ARs and saying, look, there's just no way this AR duo can continue to last the test of time in this league. I think we probably predicted it going into when they picked up this roster. But again, it seems to be the case. So Nero, Kenny, Geo, Estriel all played pretty well. But it was really Nero and at times Kenny, especially in the search and destroys on the map 5, that were the key difference maker here, and Falcons go home. As I say, there's also Halo going on at the venue and Counter-Strike and all sorts of stuff. As Formal says, I just played those Slayers so bad. They did eventually lose to TSM. Not the end of the world for OpTic, really, but they, 3-0 Gen G in their group. They went down 3-2 to TSM. They've got a couple more games to come there. One more game to come in their group through Pool A. If they win that one, they'll have no issues making it to the bracket. But, early days looking pretty enticing on the Halo side. But let's talk about OpTic, right, in the COD side, and where they go from here, because I think we expected them to play better this LAN, but beating Toronto is still a good result. Yeah, Toronto aren't great, and they had to struggle past Ravens in a Game 5 round 11 in the losers bracket, and they've clearly, it seems, been affected to some degree by this whole Mercury situation. Neither of their ARs have really played that great lately, and OpTic, to be fair, handled business. Yeah, they lost the protocol control, but everything else is very impressive. I think the entire team deserves a lot of credit. Mercury is for sure, but also I think Huke, I would say, has been their stand-up player as of late. This was the key note, though, really. Dashy had obviously finished the match, and here he is on his phone immediately afterwards, bringing up the VOD of that series, Toronto OpTic, just to watch a couple of things back and, analyse ways they could have played certain things different or better or whatever. And, well, I imagine that's the goal, really, rather than looking at, damn, I fried on that hill. I imagine it's more about, okay, where do we go from here? Because from OpTic's perspective, finally, after all the iterations of rosters they put together this year, they found one that actually works. They've gone through a lot this season, and when it mattered at the end of the year, Mercury just came onto the scene magically out of nowhere because Beans had the visa issues. OpTic decided, Hex and Zinni or whatever, right? They decided to take the risk, and maybe on some sense it wasn't much of a risk because it was, just worth a go, right? Of course, it felt like a strange decision at the time just because they did so right after 3-0ing Surge, which at the time was like a really impressive result, but in hindsight now Surge have come to this tournament and got top 12 bopped out. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, look, nobody denies that getting Mercury's into Skyz was the correct call, but look, they made the decision to do so. They've built a roster that could actually do something, and where could they go from here potentially? Look, Thieves and FaZe are still going to be the teams to beat, but Surge are already out of the tournament. Toronto aren't looking so good. Heretics are another serious threat potentially in the tournament, but OpTic will be looking at the bracket and thinking, you know what, this is certainly achievable right now to make a serious run deep in the tournament. And look, if they can make Sunday OpTic, if they can get top 3, if they can even go one better than that and try and make a finals, which I think is still a tall order given the rivals they're up against, but if they can, it gives them great momentum going into the World Championship, which they are now officially qualified for, and maybe gives them a better seeding as well. We'll have a look at the bracket in a second and the fact that they play FaZe today, but these are the championship standings, and OpTic, with their victory yesterday, they got 30 points on the board. That guarantees them up to 205 points. As you can see, that moves them ahead of Boston, which means that Champs is now official for OpTic, because, not both of these guys can drop out because, Falcons are out of the tournament, Gentlemates can't secure that many points even if they win the whole thing, Cloud9 are out, and it's only really Rokkr remaining. Now, Rokkr, just to keep in mind, they can overhaul Boston, so Rokkr are currently top 8, if they win another game, they're currently top 6, aren't they? So if they win another game, they get to top 4, and they get to 180. And then if they get to top 3, well, yeah, I mean, it's tough for Rokkr, isn't it, really? I think they're going to have to make finals, aren't they, right, to overhaul Boston here. So even top 3 for Rokkr isn't enough. They're going to need to make the run all the way to the finals, which realistically isn't going to happen, but Kenny's going to try and stay alive until it does. So Boston should still be fine, but they aren't going to be the 8th seed, assuming that Rokkr bow out before the finals. But OpTic, they could go further here. Now, for OpTic's side, they're only 15 points behind Ravens. If they get one more win, let's say they lose to FaZe, they get one more win, then they lose. They finish top 4. That would get them to 220, but they lose their head-to-head against Ravens this year because they played a few times. Ravens mostly beat them at the start of the year. So Ravens would win the head-to-head, so OpTic actually need to get 3rd, and if they get 3rd, then they would overhaul the Ravens into, and technically I think if they won the whole thing, they'd be able to overhaul Miami as well. But if they would to get 3rd, then they would likely be the 6th seed, they would be, and therefore they would play Toronto in the first round, which is definitely a preferable game compared to playing FaZe or Thieves in the first round, you would think. So look, it's not all about champs. As I said at the start of the video, the feeling for OpTic will be, okay, you know, let's just do as well as we can do, make it as deep as we can, and then let that situation just figure itself out. Because at least they've now got the slight pressure off their back. I'm sure they were confident making champs this tournament anyway, but at least they've got the pressure at their back. They have made it now. That is official. And, yeah, as Shotzzy's words, he said, oh, you guys think we're terrible, we're not going to make champs? Well, look, they did make it at the end. They did make it, but, not been incredibly clean. Now, the big series, though, of course, is that today they play Atlanta FaZe. And this is the series that is really going to be quite telling, because FaZe are FaZe, certainly in a World Championship, you know, end-of-season context. When FaZe have a bad tournament as well, like whenever FaZe don't make a finals of a tournament, I said this on the desk yesterday, whenever they're like, you know, top 6, top 4, whatever, or like, you know, they don't make the finals, they're almost always there the next tournament. And that's probably what we're going to see again. But as Dashy said at the time, that's the start we needed. GG's Ultra, we play FaZe or Cloud9 tomorrow. Of course, it turned out to be FaZe. But even, you know, FaZe, the 2 maps they played, the Search and Destroy, they lost it to C9. And the Control was, you know, pretty close that FaZe potentially could have lost. It was actually the hardpoints they really delivered on. So that, I think, is the interesting question, because FaZe have clearly been working hard on their hardpoint, right? And as they should, because it has been the one game mode that's been holding them back. But sometimes you work really hard on one game mode, and some other game mode kind of drops away and isn't as good as you would like it to be. So it's too early to say whether that's going to be true for FaZe, but OpTic are looking reasonably well-rounded in the modes. Like, if OpTic play Thieves, I'm still taking Thieves to win the Control every time. But apart from that, the hardpoint was looking pretty decisive. And, yeah, Huke, Shotzzy looked really impressive. And FaZe, I think, are still a little bit vulnerable. I'm not convinced that FaZe, look, they could easily win this tournament for sure, but going in, I felt like Thieves were the favourites. I just think they're a bit more well-rounded as a team right now, and, you know, there's less risk, I think, that Thieves lose a series they should win than there is with FaZe at the moment. But having said that, both of these series in the upper bracket are very tasty indeed. So Heretics play Thieves. I mean, look, I don't know, if Heretics win this series, they can win the whole tournament. I don't know whether it's doable. I mean, you know, we've seen it happen before when Thieves play Heretics and get the job done. I'm expecting that to happen here again. But I do think Heretics have a really good chance this tournament. You look at the bracket, Surge are already gone, Ultra looking shaky. As it looks right now, it would be a surprise if the teams that we see in the upper side are not the 4 teams on the Championship Sunday. You'd probably expect that they would be. But Thieves just won yesterday against Surge so impressively. I know that Surge then bombed out, and Rokkr, who Heretics trio, did not bomb out. But still, I think Thieves look a little bit too good. I was having a chat with a couple of people last night suggesting that, you know, Thieves are just mega consistent in their scrims. Like, they will fry you in scrims, obviously, as the top teams will, but, like, they will fry you bad and every time. Whereas the other teams is not necessarily like that, even the likes of FaZe. And obviously scrims is largely respawn and hardpoint and stuff like this, but I don't know. Thieves just, I've felt for some time when they play their best stuff, they're unbeatable, and that's kind of how I feel about it right now. But, you know, you can catch them lacking, and Heretics are not a team to take lightly. They've been very impressive so far this tournament and, frankly, this year. But OpTic FaZe, I mean, what a banger, right? And finally, we get OpTic FaZe happening again in a context where it actually seems exciting. You know, this year, FaZe have dominated this matchup. Sure, Drazah the CEO and all this, but at the end of the day, OpTic now look like a different team, and, you know, FaZe have their weaknesses too. Can OpTic win? Yeah. Are they favourites to win? Probably not. I think there's questions on, you know, a couple of things here. FaZe in 5, I think, is probably what I would lean towards. But it would be a crazy result, because if OpTic get top 3, they win this series. That guarantees themselves all the way there to playing Toronto, probably first round of the World Championship. The loser of that series then plays Rokkr. So Rokkr could potentially knock OpTic out and then make the run to finals and then make it to champs, but that's pretty unlikely. Rokkr do have a really tall task on their hands, absolutely. So anyway, today we're going to see Gentlemates play Ultra first up, then we're going to get the 2 upper round games, then we're going to get the 2 elimination games, and that's going to leave us into our 4 matches on the Championship Sunday. So very much interested to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.